Jaya Prabhuji. Hello, welcome to the Retroprogressive Yoga Institute. My name is Swami Omkarananda. I am a disciple of Prabhuji since 1995, and in this institute I share my reflections on the teachings of Prabhuji. Prabhuji wrote many books, but I think the message behind all of them is that you are welcome and encouraged to explore, find your answers, investigate into the nature of your existence. And the different books show us and display the path of those who live a life of exploration and kindly enough left their footsteps so we can go after them, release them, learn from them, and then find our way to our awakening. This message, the retroprogressive message, honors very much the tradition, the heritage, the spiritual heritage of all traditions of the world, but more than anything else invites you to exploring with your own tools into your own being, with your own consciousness. So what I'm doing in these courses is sharing the treasures that we inherit from the Tantrika seekers and acharyas. The book Tantra Liberation in the World is the book that we are studying in this course, and is a treasure. It's really a wealth of insights, of different paths. I think one of the things that inspires me the most is that novelty, that suddenly the different seekers go and develop in different directions, finding their way and the way to tackle into the potential of their human existence in order to really transcend and liberate. So with this inspiration, I want to start this class by clarifying that this is my understanding of what Prabhuji shares. You are very welcome to read the book directly. That is the direct words of Prabhuji. But what I do in these courses is to try to summarize different chapters, maybe to explain some terminology that might be more difficult for beginners, and share what the impact that this treasure makes in me. This is the course number 3 that we are doing on the book. If you didn't watch the previous ones, I really recommend to start gradually, because we are very advancing towards this complex really revelation. There is many stages and directions and revelations, so it's not an easy read, this book, I will say. In this course, we are working on the section of the Ati Marga, and this is the class number 3. In this class, we will start exploring the fascinating spiritual path of the Pashu-patas. Let's see how we start by defining what are the Pashu-patas. Definition. The first ascetic Shaiva monks belonged to the Pashu-pata sect. Pashu-pata Shaivism was a devotional, bhakti, and ascetic Tapas movement which aims for liberation, moksha. It started as an oral tradition, so its origin is uncertain. It is believed to have originated between the 2nd century BCE and the 2nd century CE. It was influential in the later development of Shaivism. Pashu-patas were ascetic monks that from within the worshippers of Shiva, the Shaiva Bhaktas, wanted to do a step forward and take their life, their spiritual search in totality. We can only feel awe and admiration for the seriousness and the commitment of these seekers to liberation. The path that they chose was a very novel path at this time, was a step forward in the spiritual development and search of the human being. They chose to renounce the world completely and dedicate themselves to reconnect to their nature and to transcend it. In this class and in the next, we will dedicate to explore the ways that they chose from what we can reconstruct, because it was a very ancient sect and very oral tradition in the beginning, so we cannot we lack many of the details, the historical details, but for sure we get the spirit of their search, and we can get nourished from their findings, from the direction that they point, and from the wisdom that they developed. Name. Pashu-patas carefully followed their devotional practices in the worship of Rudra or Shiva as Pashu-pati, or the Lord of the Beasts, the sect's namesake. This name comprises Pashu, which means beast or animal, and Pati, which means master or lord. When they are born, all creatures are conditioned by their karma and sensual desire. The conditioned soul is called Pashu. Shiva is considered Pashu-pati, or the master and lord of the beasts, to whom everyone returns. Only Pashu-pati waits at the end of the path. A fully enlightened being is beyond the level of instinct. The Jivan Mukta, or person liberated in life, can be considered the master and sovereign of bestial inclinations. Pashu-pati. Pashu is what we are, beasts, animals. This is our incarnation. Somehow humans disconnected from their animal, believing themselves to be something different and having the right to be the king of all the rest of the species. We are not different than beasts, and the fact that we ignore our animalistic inclinations is what put us in this conflicted situation in which most of our decisions are originated in the instinctive level of our animal, but yet we are not aware of it, and we illusionary think that we make rational decisions. The situation of the human is very peculiar. We have been given some gift that is the source of our joy and the source of our sorrow. And the disconnection from our nature, our tendencies, the ignorance and the disconnection from nature is what leads this species to be in such a conflictive state. The spiritual path is a path to find the harmony with the beast that I am, and with the purpose of the Pashu-pati, with the Lord that created this beast, and what I am expected to do, what I am expected to be. Lord Shiva is worshipped by these seekers as Pashu-pati, and the life that they choose is the life of reconnection with Shiva by the means of ritual and worship, but also to reconnection to the animal in me. How they do it? Okay, they go back to nature, to live more close to the animals than to the mental reconstruction of the human society. In this way, they are also the protectors of the animals. Same as Shiva is the creator and protector of the animals, they are choosing a path of non-violence toward any species, not only humans, but animals. Therefore, choosing a life of vegetarianism and non-killing, no sacrifice of animals, as may other spiritual paths have. So these benevolent souls, these harmless souls, that they wanted to find themselves, really find their way back to their origin, they give us a hint and an inspiration. Our relationship with the Pashus, with the rest of the Pashus, is very peculiar. And while every animal is very governed by their own instinct, at the same time they're very obedient to the dictation of the instinct. The instinct is in the hands of nature. It is said that the human species is the one and only experiment that nature did to see what happened to a species when free will is given. Meaning that we can follow the laws of the instinct, but we can oppose them. What happened when we have the choice? Now, what happened in us, it's really fascinating and in a way terrifying, because we develop very destructive tendencies, and the relationship between the members of the species is very conflictive. And from this search for what is the right way to behave, what is the right way to live a human life, these sects come, because there were calls for certain change in the ethics of the way. Think about these seekers in a world where there is empires and conquers and wars and killings, and they suddenly choose the path of non-violence. It's just to applaud them, and I wish that we will, even one little vow of the Pashu-pata will change the face of the earth, because humans are not able to raise to the ethic standards that these seekers did. So what we can only do, as Prabhuji always instructs us, is just check yourself. Don't try to change the Pashus of the world, but know your own Pashu. This will be a big contribution. This will be actually the only contribution when you, as a human being, know your nature, discover your nature, and learn how to live in harmony with yourself and with others. That's all what we need. Just one person. It's not that difficult. We cannot change the world. We can only change ourselves, and then the world will change. And this is the focus that Prabhuji put us when we try to make justice, or when we complain about injustice or a lack of harmony. He said you have no one to look at but yourself. Look in yourself, improve yourself, be aware of yourself, and then the human species will make a step forward. But you cannot change others. This is the adventure that we are in, and I hope that you will be able to grasp some of the bravery of these Pashu-patas. I hope I will be able to take, because they were very brave, as we will study. So, Lord of the Pashus, Pashu-pati, that was the form of Shiva, the name of Shiva that was worshipped, and they were fervent bhaktas, crazy bhaktas, that they were ready to go so far to deepen the relationship with Shiva and to discover themselves. The Pashu-pata movement was a very significant stage in the development of Indian spirituality. They marked the beginning of the new type of spirituality that will become very spiritual and give birth to some of the most brilliant sages of the era, and creating a whole new way to approach, and so many liberated souls that walk this path and inspires generations to come. We will study the historical context, the date, and the circumstances of this movement. But to start this journey, I want to focus on one Pashu-pata, not the Pashu-patas as a social phenomenon, but this one Pashu-pata. They mostly were coming from the Brahmana caste, meaning they came from a life of privilege and a security. And this movement was truly to leave the world, to break all the social conventions that you raised into, and to choose to totally surrender to Pashu-pati, same as a wild animal living in the forest is totally depending on the Lord of the beasts. And this is the life that they chose. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of that one Brahmana, that on one side he had the opportunity to have a very comfortable life, following the Vedic principles, making a family, having quite a bright future of honor, privilege, and wealth. Yet, being hesitating if this is the way I need to live my life. Is those ethical principles that I was raised into, if those are the right ones, if those are relevant for my time. Hermann Hesse, the writer, wrote a novel called Siddhartha. Most of the people that are interested in spirituality read this book, and if not, I really recommend it. But the character of this novel is a young Brahmana. His name was Siddhartha, and he was in this circumstance in which he was a very bright young Brahmana with a very quiet and secure future, beloved by his parents and admired by his peers. But he looked at the samanas, which were ascetics, monks that were wandering around, begging and dedicating spiritual practice, and his fire of exploration ignite. And he couldn't continue with the path of his karma or his caste, and he decided to join them. And we see in the novel the tragedy that was for their parents, and how much they oppose this decision, because of course they want him to follow the path of the Brahmanas. But he said, step aside in an incredible act of bravery and join a life of uncertainty. And the book goes on and tells the fascinating story of his life, and we might go into it in later classes. But I think this novel depicts this hesitation and the difficulty of choosing a life of asceticism. Of course, it was selected to the very serious seekers that could stand on a lifetime vow, which is a commitment that you cannot break, and which you take with a lot of uncertainty, because the Pashu-pata teachings were esoteric. They didn't preach to the non-initiated. You needed to commit first and then be exposed to the knowledge after. So you go for the unknown, you follow your heart, you follow your love for Shiva, and you break all the chains of your karma. This is how Prabhuji defined the Jivan Mukta. The liberated in life, it's conquer Pashu-pati, conquer the instinct, conquer the animalistic tendency, and become truly free. And this is what is the maximum potential of the human being. Now, this situation in which a Pashu-pata hesitates, which life should I live? What is the life worth living? As many Greek philosophers ask themselves, what is the ethical principles that I don't accept what was so far? I want to know what is true, not what is imposed. And the bravery to step aside of the path and join this uncertainty of a life of asceticism. The life of the Pashu-patas was a gradual life in which the vows went and become more demanding. And we will study in the next class all the stages that they had to go through. In modern terms, we can compare this life to a life of a homeless. But usually, a person in this situation is the circumstances that brought him, the injustice, the lack of opportunity, or the lack of responsibility. But those seekers is that one that feel tied by the modern life commitments and choose voluntarily to become a homeless. Now, this homeless is that one that when you go to the office and you see him by the side of the street, you envy him because he's happy, fulfilled, doesn't need any material possession, is joyfully enjoying in contact with the elements, and he's laughing, and he's making you question who is more free, who is more privileged. I'm so stressed, I'm so committed, I'm so tired, I cannot be myself, I forgot about who I am, I'm disconnected from nature, from the animal in me. And I see this person that has nothing and owns nothing, smiling and in peace with himself, in love, in passionate love with the Creator. Who is more advanced? Who is more privileged? This is what happened. The Pashu-patas, living a life of absolute renunciation, they start awakening the regular society into a questioning of what the wealth will bring me, what is life. And I think those are the symbols of remembering. And honestly, they start mocking society too, because the way of the mass obedience, they start looking suddenly, okay, maybe I am just another sheep. I don't have the ability to choose different. So am I free? Can I be a Pashu-pata? If I want, do I have the courage to break free? Do I have the courage to give up? I'm so attached to my things. I am free or I am a slave of them. So this type of brave seekers awaken us so many questions, and it's a great service that they do by a merely personal choice, not by preaching this to others, but by living an alternative life of connection to their nature, to their animal, and a very committed life of spiritual vows. So what we will study in this class is which vows they assume when they choose the path of the Pashu-patas. The Pashu-pata vow. The Pashu-pata vow and its associated practices are described in several ancient texts, including Mahabharata. By the Pashu-pata vow, by penances, by Brahmacarya, and by self-control, a person obtains auspiciousness, fame, and heaven. In the Manusmriti, we read, by practicing the Pashu-pata vow, one attains the highest goal, which is freedom from bondage in this world and in the next. The Shiva Purana says the Pashu-pata vow is the best of all vows. By taking this vow, one becomes pure and attains the ultimate reality. The Kularnava Tantra says the Pashu-pata vow consists of non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, celibacy, control of the mind, control of the senses, and devotion to Lord Shiva. By taking this vow, one becomes free from all sins and attains liberation. The Kurma Purana describes tranquil, with the mind under one's control, the body covered with ashes, devoted to celibacy and naked, one should observe the Pashu-pata vow. In former days, I created the Pashu-pata vow, says Shiva, more secret than secret, subtle and the essence of the Veda, for man's liberation. The sage, devoted to the practice of the Vedas, wearing nothing but a loincloth or single piece of clothing, should meditate upon Shiva, the Lord of the beast, Pāśu-pati. We can see how the Pāśu-patis were glorified, and this vow was tough, was difficult, and therefore only selected ones could make this step towards total commitment for spiritual search. And of course, luminaries, the amazing luminaries came out from among these sages that achieve liberation, and they're enlightening the world with hope and with alternatives. They also brought a wealth of ethical principles that I wish we could hear their guidance. Even for only one of the vows, this society will be so different. 2000 years passed since they were walking the earth, and we went so far from the principles that they presented. But the world is lived by your personal choice. These sages left behind a life of privilege and wealth for a voluntary poverty, totally subject to the grace and protection of Shiva, of Pashu-pata. They left behind a life of literacy, which was a privilege in that time, to a life that prioritized practice above philosophy or knowledge. They left behind a very ancient and established 1,000-year-old tradition to create some new advancement that, as they said, it was a path forward. It was a fifth ashrama. It was a development and not a rebellion against the Vedism. Some of the most prominent spiritual inspirations of this world, they were in a similar situation. We know that Moses was a prince in the Egyptian palace when he chose to join the slaves and guide them through the deserts to the promised land. Buddha famously was the son of the king, about to inherit the kingdom and choose to renounce. Muhammad was a very rich merchant and chose the path of following Allah. So the examples of the privileged ones that choose to renounce the world are so inspiring, and the Pashu-patas are in this category of people that had a very defined future and choose an extreme life of surrender to God. So when I hear this, I see in my little and simple and ordinary life how many decisions we have that we need to see. Do I choose the comfort or do I choose my heart call? How much courage you need to break with expectations of others to you, but how much enslavement you have when you are tied to what others define for your life. How you can live a fulfilled life if you live fulfilling the expectations of others. And others you can never totally please, because they're by themselves, they're not fulfilled if they're projecting their expectation upon you. So if anything we can take from these seekers is this loyalty to their search, to their heart, the bravery to live the destiny that they were destined to, and choose to do a step forward. And of course the totality that they took the spiritual search. We can only bow down before them and hope that something from their spirit will, by the grace of Lord Shiva, fall upon us. Now we will go over the different components of the Pashu-pata vow and study a little bit what Prabhuji writes in his book about them. The Pashu-pata vow. The Pashu-pata vow is a set of ethical and religious principles followed by the Pashu-pata sect of Hinduism. The elements of the vow are Ahimsā, non-violence; Satya, truthfulness; Asteya, non-stealing; Brahmacarya, celibacy; Aparigraha, non-possession; Śauca, purity; Tapas, austerity; and Īśvara-praṇidhāna, devotion to God. ethical and spiritual values to follow. For those who are familiar with the Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali Maharishi and are familiar with the yamas and niyamas of that path, this vow might sound familiar. Why? Because the Pashu-patas are believed to be the origins of all types of yoga. Those were the first yogics, basically, and upon their inspiration, philosophical schools like the yoga school was built, and Patanjali, as a compiler, when wrote the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he took a lot of inspiration from the Pashu-patas, creating his own path based on the darshan of the yoga and the Sankhya that we will maybe learn in a different course, but taking a lot of the vows that the Pashu-pata were living already. They were before, but quite contemporaneous of the yoga darshana. Now we will go a little bit into each one of these vows and study this further. 1. Ahimsā, non-violence. The Pashu-pata vow emphasizes non-violence towards all living beings, including animals. The Pashu-patas understood the karmic consequences of killing other sentient beings, let alone to eat them. They were not ready for that. Moreover, they said that we are not meant to do that. It's not in our nature, and we are becoming very isolated from our nature. If we will only hear to our instinct, we will see that killing is not a motivation, it's a learned behavior that we copy from others. So they were the first vegetarians that they said that we can live in peace and harmony with other Pashus. We can protect them. We have more intelligence not to exploit them, but to protect. And this, they were speaking about ecology. They could never imagine how the world will become 2,000 years later, the situation that we are now, this mass production of animals as if they were part of a production line and not sentient beings. It's inhuman, and they saw it much before. There were other religions that they condemned non-killing between humans, but not other animals. Famously, the Ten Commandments include do not kill, but do not slay other humans. Yet they have animal sacrifices in the temple, and they had, of course, the kosher laws that instruct how to minimize suffering when killing other animals. But the path of the Pashu-patas do not support any type of violence. Moreover, they resemble the Jainism. If you're familiar with those, the Jainas take very, very seriously the path of Ahimsā and protect any insect from being killed. So they took the Pashu-patas used to stop their walking around the pilgrimage during the rainy season, because there are so many animals that come in the season that can be killed by them walking around. So they took very serious steps toward non-violence, and I'm so inspired. I said, if I will take a path of non-violence to any sentient beings, first of all, how liberated will be karmatic and in my peace of mind, because when we hurt others physically, verbally, even only by thought, we feel the burden of this karma. And it's more than a release, it's a weight that we add upon ourselves with negativity. And if the laws of karma says that we will need to repay this debt of karma. How? By suffering ourselves, the suffering that we cause to others. Prabhuji spoke yesterday about vulnerability and why it's important to develop this equality in spiritual life, because when our defenses are very high, when we are very protected, we are also very disconnected from our nature. We are in the defensive, and then we are blocking from being in contact with something of the divine that should possess us. This is the reconnection with the divine. Now look at the Pashu-patas. They chose a path of complete vulnerability. They didn't have a house. They wandered around. They gave up all possessions, all sense of security. And this is what Prabhuji says actually, that these defenses give us a sense of security, but it's a false sense of security, because the reality is that you are helplessly in the hands of the divine. And this false sense of security keeps you in the false identification with the I. You protect something that is non-existing. The ego becomes solid just because all the defenses that you put around. And if you one day want to surrender totally to the will of God, so you need to lower the defenses. This is the practice that the Pashu-patas took upon themselves, the path of non-violence. Let's take it for an hour, for a day, for a week. This world will be so much nicer even if one decide to be inspired by the non-violence of the Pashu-patas. 2. Satya, truthfulness. Followers of the Pashu-pata vow are expected to always speak the truth. They have so much to teach us about ethics. Always speak the truth. Many people will not be able to make a living if they need to commit to this vow. Always speak the truth. So much in our world is based on deception and lie. How beautiful it will be that more of us, even if not asceticism, will be just take this vow of truthfulness. We are so defensive because in a lie, in the world of deception, everyone needs to keep their defense high. And then we disconnect from each other, we are defensive, and we disconnect from our nature ultimately. If we could trust, if we only could trust, this human mind is so deceiving, and to take a vow like this is admirable. I was inspired by the life of Saint Augustine, one of the first Christians and one of the saints of Christianity, that originally he was a lawyer, and he wanted very much to become a lawyer. He came from a poor family, and he'd make enormous efforts to be able to be accepted in a position such as a lawyer. And he had a trial in which he needed to defend a man who was accused by killing or an attempt to kill his wife. And he was so skilled and so brilliant and so smart that he managed to convince the jury that this was an innocent man, that he cannot be, this accusation or false accusation. And the jury was convinced, and the person was released. So what is the truth? Is this a person incapable of killing his wife, or he is a danger and he should be in jail? Because Saint Augustine managed to convince the jury, the truth was this: the person was innocent. In this, he was released. He went back to his family, and this time he managed to kill his wife. So the son came back to Saint Augustine and said, see what you did. See what you defended. Now he managed to kill my mother. So this was so impactful for him. So what is truth? If I manage to convince the jury or a judge of my version of reality, does it make it truth? So what this make him feel, of course, so guilty, because he was defending just because of his skills. So he was in charge, he was responsible for this murder, because he was the one who released the person. And you start questioning, so what is truth? So why I'm defending things that are false? So what is truth? Each one of us has his own version of the truth, and that this world will be so much nicer if we are able to meet with a truthful heart, with a honest heart, and each one try to see the world from the eyes of the other. So while we defend our lie, our illusion, our separation, self-realization is very hard. So this is not that difficult step to take. It's not asceticism, it's not voluntary homelessness, but let's get inspired from this and try to make 1 hour this vow one day, and hopefully all our lives. Asteya, non-stealing. The Pashu-pata vow prohibits stealing or taking what is not given. Not take what is not given. This has a very profound spiritual dimension, to check what is given and not to ask. The ego, by its nature, is will to take. And the vow of not steal and not take anything that is not given to you is an act of surrender. Even it appears in the 10 Commandments of the Torah, do not steal. But in the context of the Pashu-pata, it comes together with a total life of renunciation. They don't have any possession. They just wander around. And they beg for alms, but they cannot steal. So look at this combination. They are totally up to the grace of Shiva that will be expressed by the generosity of the people to nourish them. Otherwise, they cannot kill to eat. They cannot steal to eat. They can only ask. And the humility that it demands, a demanding vow like this, that doesn't give you any other choice but surrender and being taken care of by Shiva, the Lord of the Pashus, in the same way that every animal in the forest is taken care by the Lord of the Pashus. So it's a really reconnection, is to step out from this social convention that we created, and by doing that we disconnect from our nature, as a step towards reconnection to our transcendental nature, that this is the special capacity of the humans. 4. Brahmacarya, celibacy. Pashu-patas are expected to practice celibacy in order to control their desires and focus on spiritual pursuits. The first monks of the Ati-marga were celibates. Afterwards, with the development of this branch of Shaivism, we saw that later on these ascetics were experimenting with the sexual energy, because they discover in it a potential for empowerment and liberation. And we will study in these following classes what their discoveries were. But the ability to control the sexual urge is, I think, the most difficult of all. And the animals are very driven by the pursuit of reproduction, helplessly driven by it. And they are empowered by the sexual desires. But the Pashu-patas, they were the Lord of the Pashus, and they had to overcome this very powerful force of nature that operates in them and channel it for spiritual pursuit. and find in themselves the transcendence of the animal instincts. 5. Aparigraha, non-possession. The Pashu-pata vow encourages renunciation of material possessions and attachments to worldly things. In the words of Prabhuji, having renounced to their possessions, homes and families, they wandered without a fixed course, carrying iron tridents and heavy maces. They traveled the roads of the world with a deep aspiration to transcend human conditioning. In order to access the transcendental, they uprooted themselves from the earthly. Do you ever have a feeling that you would like to dedicate more to introspection, to meditation, to deal with spiritual subjects, but you're too busy with the worldly occupations? Think about them, that they were in a similar situation, that they said, okay, enough is enough. I step out of the world and follow my soul, follow my heart, my love for God, and renounce to all the worldly occupation. Now the world is shouting us, and this was back then. Which worldly occupation can we imagine 2,000 years ago? Now we are so distracted by the happenings of the world, the amount of communication and technology that we are surrounded. But I want to bring this light and hope of these principles to see that ultimately we might have a choice, and we might need to have the courage that they had to step aside and uproot, as Prabhuji said, ourselves from the earthly. Maybe we don't need even to do any external change. Maybe it's just a matter of what I prioritize, where my attention goes, what I choose, what I reject, to which tendencies I am giving up, giving in and following, or which tendencies I give up and overcome and transcend. So the Aparigraha, the non-possession, is to live with the minimum. It was in a time where monastic life or monasteries were not so prominent. It was even before Christianity. With time, we see the development of these different monastic communities based on this principle of non-possession, similar to the community of the Ramakrishna monastic order that I am part of, in which nothing belongs to you personally, with the understanding that we cannot take anything with us. So there is no point to get attached to anything. And the comforts of modern human life, they are tempting, because the more possession we have, the more we feel we are. We had a talk yesterday with Prabhuji about why the other is so important in my decisions or in my considerations, so in my well-being. What is the place of the other? And Prabhuji explained brilliantly that the other defined me. If it was not because of the other, I would not feel separate. I would disappear if it's not because the other judge me, look at me. Even the other things define my limits. If I touch, means that I stop here and something else. Everything around this define my ego, my separation, enforce my separation. Moreover, all these possessions that the Pashu-patas gave up define who we are. So the more we possess, the more we feel that I am the possessor, I exist, I am here. And this I am is what separates me from my awareness of being one with the whole. So they give up their position, their fame, their privilege, their education, the expectations of others in order to reconnect to their nature. 6. Śauca, purity. Pashu-patas are expected to maintain physical and mental purity through practices such as bathing, meditation, and observing certain dietary restrictions. In the words of Prabhuji, They were benign wizards and passionate devotees of Shiva, who were more concerned with inner purity than superficial appearances. They aroused public contempt, but they knew that their gain was not in this temporary world. Rejecting public recognition, they longed for appreciation only from divinity. How beautiful. Appreciation only from divinity. Make me chills. It's the ultimate realization that there is only one watcher, one who watches my actions, and this is my Lord. And people are judging me, but maybe behind them is the same one consciousness trying to teach me a lesson. And I believe that once we are loyal to this beyond, to our nature, so the judgments of others will become lessons. And we can learn from what they said, but it doesn't mean that it defined me, because they also see the world from their perspective, from their angle. And ultimately, they are characters in my dream. This is what many times I try to look at a situation from the perspective that everyone is a character in my dream. So it means that we are not really separate. We are part of the same reality. And when looking like this, you can look at the same from a different perspective. This purity that the Pashu-pata aspires to is to see the one behind all multiplicity. This is the ultimate purity in which I don't judge others just because I'm not separate from others. The Pashu-patas had a custom in which they had to bathe a few times a day with ashes. What that means, they went naked and they covered their bodies with ashes. The ashes is a reminder of the temporality of this world, that ultimately we're going from ashes to ashes. And this is the destiny of this body. But what remains beyond death? What never dies in me? What I am really? I am this body. So by making this body in tune with the divine will, by restraining the animalistic instincts that drive our life helplessly, and by reminding themselves the temporality of this life, therefore covering themselves with ashes and going in the crematoriums, making rituals in the crematoriums, dealing with the reality of death together without not killing anyone. What a sublime spiritual life they live. 7. Tapas, austerity. The Pashu-pata vow encourages a life of austerity and self-discipline in order to cultivate spiritual growth. In the words of Prabhuji, these ascetics wander wearing deer skin and were smeared with ashes. Their oily locks were tied in bands and their hearts were filled with intense devotion. They saw their beloved Shiva behind the variety of names and forms. Austerities. Just to be a wandering monk living in the nature without homes, it was by itself an ascetic life of sacrifice and austerities. But it's not with the purpose of just inflicting self-suffering, but with the purpose of overcoming the control of the mind. The mind is just a chatterbox. Prabhuji said the other day, it's like you go around with a TV full volume. You cannot even connect to life. You are so loud. The mind is so loud. Or disconnecting you, let alone from your true nature, even from your sensory perceptions. You are in this TV, watching this TV all day. Now what happened is that this TV is telling you comfort, comfort, comfort. If you read all the channels of the mental TV, comfort, comfort, how I achieve comfort, how I achieve comfort. If there is something that is uncomfortable, how we avoid discomfort, avoid discomfort. All the channels, the same message. And therefore you are like helplessly going around and trying to acquire comfort and avoid discomfort. Basically a very simple advertisement. Every advertisement tells you more comfort, less discomfort. That's the jail of the mind. But then what happened? We are living an empty, unfulfilled life, just trying to avoid discomfort and running after comfort. And we know that there is no amount of comfort that will make me feel peace of mind, because this is a constant, the desires machine is constantly being encouraged and constantly shooting more desires. It's just a jail, just a treadmill. It's the slavery that the Pashu-patas point to. So the control of the mind, what the Tapas make, I will break this, I will turn off this TV that asks me all the time for comfort. I will go for discomfort head on. I go for it voluntarily. Why? What a willpower we need, right? Imagine to do one thing today that you really, really don't like, but take it as a tapas, as an austerity. I will do it because I want to break the slavery of the mind. And they took it all the way. They achieved such a level of self-discipline and self-control that they could break this mechanism of the mind and reconnect to the real, true happiness and joy that lies behind this TV. What is the joy? This silence that's there when we turn off the TV. And finally, 8. Īśvara-praṇidhāna, devotion to God. The Pashu-pata vow emphasizes devotion to God and the practice of religious rituals and ceremonies as a means of attaining spiritual realization. In the words of Prabhuji, this path was like acid for the egoic phenomenon of its practitioners, who aspire to receive karunya, or the compassionate grace of Lord Shiva. Freedom from social approval was a way to counteract psychological conditioning and get closer to the transcendental, or the beloved Lord Shiva. These fervent seekers gave up their pride, public respect, and vanity in exchange for something that this world could not give them. God bless them for this understanding that there is something more valuable that this world cannot give. They were bhaktas, but passionate bhaktas. They were engaged in rituals and offerings and sacrificing and glorifying and repeating the names of Shiva. Those were the originators of all these practices that we saw developing later on to all kinds of darshanas and directions. They repeat the name of Shiva. They were totally depending on the grace of Shiva. They aspire to get his protection, which is the best protection. Who can protect them if not the divine? We dedicate our life to create this feeling of security by possession, by following the social convention, by creating pride and position in life, honor. All these things give us a sense of being someone and being protected. But these seekers wanted only the compassion of Shiva. By their sacrifice to awake the compassion and be protected by the only one who can really protect us, that is the divine. Because ultimately, as Prabhuji wrote before, only Shiva waits at the end of the path. So this sense of security, why we are so tense and so running after it, because we know that it's unreachable, absolute security. So they took the back door and said, I give up all my efforts to acquire security. They are useless. And I dedicate my life to surrender to my beloved, to worship me, and to get whatever he wants to give me, however it comes. And this is the life that they live. And they had and developed a very sophisticated spiritual path that we will go on and learn about it in the next class, of different stages and different practices that they ultimately get them closer to Shiva. So with this inspiration, aspiring that I will be able to apply a few of these principles even for a few minutes in my life, and inviting you to get inspired and see what is relevant, and just experimenting as they were, like really experimenting with alternative ways of spirituality, so we can get their inspiration and see what works for us with sincerity and with surrender. So grateful for them, for the standards that they set, for showing us that being human is not one thing. We can choose which type of humans we are, and if we will all be connected to our nature, so as a collective we will be able to advance and develop. So thank you, Prabhuji, for writing these books and for the opportunity to share them. We will meet in the next class. Jai Prabhuji.